welcome to another episode of the Saturday Morning Snap Fantasy Football Podcast. Your weekly dose of news and advice that comes to your pocket every single Saturday. Holding it down, here we got Mack, Mark, Scott, and Landon. Enjoy today's show.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Saturday Morning Snap Fantasy Football Podcast. Mackenzie, unfortunately, is not with us today. He is going to a Post Malone concert. So last week I was golfing in Florida, and this week Mack is going to get trashed at a concert. Sounds like an uncommitted podcast group. How you guys doing tonight?
Well, you know, as one of the committed members of this podcast who just consistently is here with Mark week in and week out, you know, all you guys gallivanting, having fun out there, golfing and going to concerts, you should be locked in a room looking at stats, Landon.
I'm trying to come up with a plan for what to do next recording session, because I think if it falls in the correct order, then I should be the next one to ghost you guys. What do you think, Scott? Me or you? Or should we both ghost them?
Hey, there you go.
I believe, Mark, I actually believe you are up next. I did the move, so I had to ghost for one episode. But you, I guess, did disappear for that solid, a month while you were off in Italy?
Okay, touche. Yeah, there was that Europe thing. All right.
Yeah,
well, we're all here. I'm pumped about it. We're a quarter of the way through the season. Holy smokes, guys. Can you believe it?
Yeah, it's crazy. Trends are starting to happen. We're starting to see some stats. Mack and I are working on our consistency rankings. So if you're a part of our Patreon community, jump on there and see these consistent guys. One guy that kind of stood out to me is Cole Beasley, is oddly consistent and has posted up, and hasn't busted you pretty much yet. He's had 10, 11-point games, fairly consistency, and he's probably available on every waiver wire.
Hey, you know what?
Yeah,
there's a lot that can be said about that Bills squad right now. They've put up the best fight against New England so far that we've seen this year.
Yes, sir. So
yeah, and the trends that are coming out, really, it's all about that consistency and those players that are giving you that value week in and week out. I think that's really that is hard to come by these days. Let me tell you.
Especially when these top-tier wide receivers like Odell Beckham, Juju, and DeAndre Hopkins have been really putting up duds of weeks. And it's even Julio Jones. They're all putting up weeks that have just kind of ruined your teams. So you're right. It's nice to have guys that can put up, that give you a good floor anyways.
Well, absolutely. I mean, 2-20 from Odell Beckham last week. You never saw that coming, but that probably sewered a lot of owners' entire matchups.
Yes, sir. So, wherever you are and however you may be listening, we thank you for tuning in to another episode. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at the Saturday Morning Snap. If you want to follow us individually, check the episode description and get us on Twitter. We're always on. This week we're talking about a little bit of stash or trash. And bro, you flexing? We're every Sunday, or almost every Sunday, we are answering questions on Sleeper. And it's mostly about those flex positions, right? It's the tough ones, the wide receiver 2, 3 fringes, the DJ Charks of the world, the Will Fullers of the world, that we're gonna help you go through and let you know who you can count on. So anything else, guys? Are you ready to get into it?
Yeah, obviously we need you guys' support. So wherever you get your podcasts, hit that subscribe button, hit that download button, and it'll bring you best of luck and great mojo for this fantasy weekend.
I hear if you write us a creative review, it's I think it's like a 15-point guarantee boost to your matchup that week. I've heard that somewhere.
That's crazy, but true, eh? That stat.
Very, very true.
Hey guys, have you guys heard about the Fanatic app? It's a great way to find a lot of fantasy data at the tip of your fingertips. It's an easy way to stay ahead of your league mates. And a lot of the information and stats we find on this podcast we get from that app. It's only available on iOS, So you should download that today. That's FANATIQ, Fanatic. So we're starting a little segment here, and I want to know, Marky, what are your favorite sell high candidates? No one wants to sell when guys are in the dumps. You don't want to sell Stephon Diggs when he's about to sit out. You don't want to sell Antonio Brown when he got released by the Patriots. You want to sell him after their big weeks. So, Marky, who are your favorite sell high candidates that you just don't really see their big seasons continuing?
So I'm going to talk about the running backs that really strike a chord with me for this question. And the first one being Todd Gurley of the Los Angeles Rams, TG 400. He is obviously, he's getting the ball not enough, as we can see, but he's making hay with the touches he does get. He's getting multiple touchdowns. He's getting you fantasy points. You got to start him. He's still at number one in LA. But you can tell he's just not the backbone player for that offense that he always has. So if you're a Todd Gurley owner, this is probably the time where you can put up a convincing argument that he is a point producer in the type of season where it's really hard to see who's going to get you points week after week. What do you guys think of Todd Gurley as a sell high?
I think that's great. Still has the name value. He finally started seeing some targets out of the backfield and got in the end zone a couple times. So I think you're right. I think this is a prime time to sell high and hopefully get a really good return. Maybe if you're hurt at other positions or you have some underperformers, you get a fringe running back 1 plus like a decent wide receiver 2. Scotty, if you had Todd Gurley, would you be selling him right now?
I really think I would. And, Mack's not here to defend the other side of this, but we've been going back and forth on it for sure. I do not think that Todd Gurley is in the same health position that he was in his prime. And I think what they're doing right now is they're trying to game manage him. And I think at a certain point, we're going to see exactly why they're trying to game manage him. And it'll be too late then. And you certainly won't be able to get another like a WR1 or something because he still holds the name value of one of the running backs in the NFL. But I think soon enough that is going to change.
And it's so hard to sell high on players because if you've been waiting for a guy to finally break out, like say you have an A.J. Brown or Corey Davis and they have a big game, you want to be like, all right, they're here to stay. But so hopefully this helps you out. Marky, who else you got that you would sell high on right now?
So a guy who had a career day last week that I would be looking to sell high right now is Leonard Fournette of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He really looked like his true self. He was running with determination and force. He put up 225 on the ground, super efficient last week.
No touchdowns, though.
No touchdowns, that's true. But even some of his blockers were looking a little better, which I don't trust the longevity of that offensive line in Jacksonville. I think when that team succeeds, it's on. It always finishes on like a It's almost like everything falls into place at the right time for these players to succeed on that team. So Leonard Fournette did look super appealing, and I don't trust him to be able to do that. He was great in his rookie campaign, slowed down big time last year, and right now he's kind of flashing a bit, but I think people really get wide eyes when they see someone like him have a big week. So he would be somewhat of an easy sell high right now, just given the other things that have happened to that team this year.
For sure. A couple of weeks ago, I was watching them play, and he had negative points and almost no yards throughout the entire game, and then he broke off that big 75-yard run. So Mack was looking to buy him, and I'm like, man, like I don't know if I want him right now. It looked so bad. He did not look elusive. He wasn't breaking tackles. He was just getting pummeled in the backfield. But after that big game, I think that's a perfect opportunity to do that. I know a popular one on Twitter is James Conner. What would you do with a guy like James Conner? Is he a sell-high candidate for either of you? Maybe Scotty. Would you buy James Conner right now, or would you look to sell him if you had him?
You know what? I'm still a buy candidate for James Conner. I do think that I think with Big Ben going down for the season, the Steelers have made it clear that they're still going to try to be competitive, and I think they're looking to hand it off to James Conner pretty much as they can. He's now become kind of the focal point for their offense, in my opinion.
Jalen Samuels looked pretty good as well, though. Does that concern you?
He does, and I'd say Jalen Samuels is actually kind of the sexy pick of the past, waiver picks of the past few weeks. I know I'm facing him in one of my leagues this week, and I'm a little concerned, but I would not give up on Conner yet. I think with Big Ben down, I still think that he's the go-to point for that offense. And Juju, unfortunately, I think is probably going to take the biggest hit of anybody on that offensive roster. So I'd be buying Conner.
Mark, you finish off with your Conner opinion and then your last sell high.
James Conner, for me, hasn't done enough to be considered as that high of an asset. He splashed against the worst run defense in the league last week, which frankly, anyone can do right now. So I don't know. That wasn't convincing enough of an argument to lead me to believe he's a top guy or that he's going to stay healthy, because, you get news breaks and you see that he is questionable here and there and everywhere. And no, he's not that valuable for me right now, but definitely a keep if you have him. So the last guy that I wanted to talk about here is a LeSean McCoy. Somehow, in 2019, he is a value and he is playing good football. He is averaging like 7 yards a carry or something right now. It's super impressive. Obviously, that is the team that can make any player succeed. I did never think that he was going to be so involved at this point, but he is. They're winning games, and he's just looking great, making excellent cuts. And if he was on my team, I'd be looking to get rid of him, just because I know that some change is coming to that offense with players coming back to full health in Damian Williams and Tyreek Hill. So their whole outlook is going to be changing upon the return of those two guys.
Yeah, sounds good. Damian, he kind of went out of nowhere. We didn't really know a whole lot why he was injured, and he's practicing now. So, people still hold value for LeSean, which they very well could. This would be the time to sell him. Some good buy low candidates. I think Mack told me he was trying to buy DeAndre Hopkins all week long. So if you're listening to this on a Saturday morning, try to get DeAndre Hopkins before this weekend if you very well can. Odell Beckham Jr. is an obvious option as well. He's only had one big week-winning game, but maybe he might start at quarterback if you saw that rocket of an arm that he had. So he could replace Baker Mayfield in the coming weeks.
You heard it here first.
Scotty, a lot of people right now are streaming quarterbacks, especially if they lost a guy like Drew Brees. Josh Allen is questionable. Big Ben, Cam Newton. So the streaming quarterback is more prevalent than ever. So who are your favorite streaming quarterbacks this week?
Normally I wouldn't be as knowledgeable about streaming quarterbacks because I'm a big fan of getting the big stud QBs. But as a one-time owner of Kirk Cousins this season, I'm well versed in streaming quarterbacks because, for all intents and purposes, that guy is done for the season.
In your mind, but in your heart, he's done.
I've given him every chance, but who knows? Maybe that'll change. That being said, let's get into a couple streaming quarterback plays for this week. My favorite of the week is Jacoby Brissett taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. And, there are a few factors in this. The big one comes down to almost any time you face the Kansas City Chiefs, that offense is probably going to be, going all out with fireworks, so you're going to have to respond back and forth. I'm always a big fan of trying to find a matchup against Kansas City if there's a half-decent offense, and I think that Indy, for what happened with Andy Luck, they're a high-powered offense. They are fun to watch, and you know what? They have enough skill on that side of the ball. That being said, T.Y. Hilton, as of now, is a game-time decision. Obviously, that will factor into, just how good of a streaming play Brissett is. But even without Hilton, he still has put up, very solid fantasy numbers. He uses his legs just enough to kind of tip the scales. And I really think Brissett this week is the play. And I have actually a lot of faith in Jacoby this week. So that's my number one streaming play of the week. Number two is a former Minnesota Viking, Mr. Teddy Bridgewater, as he goes into the hotly contested NFC South showdown against the rival Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think everybody's expecting fireworks in this matchup again. Tampa's defense has been looking better recently. However, whenever you're looking at streaming options, the secondary in Tampa Bay certainly does not, scream fear. So I do think that Bridgewater might not put up the numbers that, say, a Drew Brees would against you, but the way that that Jameis is going to be throwing the ball back and forth, I really think that this is another fireworks-heavy game. And Bridgewater, I think, is owned right now in about maybe 13% of leagues, I think, tops. So you can just go out and grab him and slot him in if you need a quarterback. Those are my two streaming plays of the week, Brissett and Bridgewater. I think if you can grab either of those if you're in need, I really think you'll be fine this week.
Yeah, I think with the Bridgewater pick, with the Brissett pick, he's just, he hasn't really faltered as the starter for the Colts yet, which super surprising, but it's a great team, and he's a very well-protected player. He's clearly shown his smarts out there on the field, and until he stops throwing multiple touchdowns per game, he's a start.
Oh, absolutely.
For sure.
I think he's one of those players that, when you look at his week-by-week log of his actual points, it was actually astonishing to me just how few owners actually own him on average, say in Yahoo Fantasy. And that's as someone who needed an emergency start this week, I was really happy to find him there because I think he's got to be in the top 15, if not top 10 of fantasy quarterbacks. And he's sitting there on the waiver wire because I think everybody just thinks this is somehow like a flash in the pan and he's going to go back to being irrelevant. But with this offense, like you said, great line, lots of skilled players, and if Hilton is healthy, that's a great passing attack. So I'm really high on him right now for sure.
I do think, as much as you are off the Cousins train, I think it's a good get-right game for Kirk this week. They play the Giants, and the squeaky wheel on both sides should get their hay, with Adam Thielen calling out his quarterback and Stephon Diggs wanting to get traded out of Minnesota. So, to be honest, I think they might just kind of give in to their wideouts. And if you're playing in any DFS lineups, tournament plays, that Thielen and Diggs should be fairly low owned. And I don't hate the stack Kirk and the two wideouts in mini to kind of right the ship a little bit in Minnesota. It's a super risky play, but I don't hate it.
No, and that the reality is we've all heard the drama going on in Minneapolis, and the only thing, like you said, that makes it risky to me is so far the Vikings have only really had success this season when they stick to their original plan, which was actually being a run-first team and just giving that ball to Dalvin Cook and seeing if he can break 120 yards. I think they have incredibly talented wide receivers who are becoming vocal because it's clear that they're being underused. The question will become if enough of that, the squeaky wheel, you want to call it, overrides the run-first mentality of the head coach. And we'll have to see because, he has to manage his players' personalities and he has to keep them happy and involved. But at the same time, most of their successes come when they go with Dalvin Cook first. So I still think there's not going to be enough passing volume to make Cousins really at least a top tier option. But I really hope for all the owners out there, it would be a lot of fun to see Thielen and Diggs both put up a great day this Sunday because they're way too talented to just be kind of stewing out of and underused.
And right now you can't really start Stephon Diggs. And I think Thielen, you have to if you own him, but the Minnesota offense can't sustain two the way they're passing it right now. For my last segment here, I am the truther on the young wide receiver, so I decided to kind of give you guys my favorite wide receiver stashes. Guys you should kind of keep on your bench for that just in case. So number one, I would say Keke Coutee. He was a popular ad this weekend. Obviously, having Kenny Stills go down to an injury really helps, and I think Keke hasn't been healthy yet, and when he was, you saw 10 plus targets from him. He was a really good PPR option in his rookie season, so as he gets healthier, I think he'll get more involved in that offense. So I like him as a stash. You can't start him yet, but I like him as a stash. And this week, I think, again, a DFS play with Christian Kirk having an ankle injury. Keyshawn Johnson is looking to start outside, probably putting Larry Fitzgerald in the slot. And those Cardinals just pass the ball so much. And early in the preseason and in the first game, Keyshawn got a lot of looks, so I like him as a stash. Antonio Callaway might be available on your waivers as well. He was a popular pickup in a lot of leagues, especially if they're deep and people know about the news. He just came off a suspension, so Jarvis Landry going down really helps. He should be in most of the time. The coach expects him to be pretty much a full participant and fully involved in the game plan and accustomed to being on the field already. So he's such a good talent. He's a really good ad just as a stash, especially if Jarvis Landry misses extended time with that concussion. And then Dante Pettis, they were on bye. We'll see what happens. He's him and Marquise Goodwin are kind of, it's tough to trust either of them right now, but as a stash, a lot of people believed in Dante Pettis, and we can't all be wrong about him, right? That's kind of what I've been feeling about him lately, and he's a decent. He's not that prototypical number one, but Jimmy Garoppolo still throws a good ball. Their team is really good, so Dante Pettis, stash him if he's on your waiver wire.
Landon, I guess this I want to say this to the fans. I'd love someone to go back into the archives of our episodes and see how many times Lando has personally plugged Keke Coutee in the last year. Like, honestly,
tons.
It's every third episode.
He's my guy. I know.
I love him too for a start this week.
I think Landon just likes saying the name Keke, and that's 90% of why you hear so much.
If you've never seen him.
Oh,
my goal is have Keke, Juju, and Didi all on my same team, all go off at the same time.
It'll just sound like you have a stutter when you're telling people who's injured.
So, next segment, we did it a couple times last year. It's called Bro, You Flexin'? So I'm going to ask either of you, and we're going to answer together when it comes to Mackenzie's turn. But who are you flexing in these scenarios? If your flex spot has a wide receiver, tight end, running back, sometimes that's an option. Other leagues maybe only have a tight end, wide receiver flex option. So some of these may or may not be on your team. Maybe these guys, you're struggling with the same decision. So we'll start with Scotty. We've got David Montgomery at Oakland or Calvin Ridley at Houston. Both guys haven't really lived up to expectations. Ridley started off the year really strong and has disappointed if he's been in your lineup. Where do you go from here? What are your decision makers? Scotty, take it.
Well, bro, I'm always flexing. If this was video, you'd be able to see that. To answer this specific question, I'm going to side with David Montgomery against the Raiders. This kind of comes down, I do like to flex running backs as often as possible against wide receivers within reason in certain situations. And with this one, I just rather take on that Raiders D than Houston. Like you said, Ridley started really strong. I'd say that Julio's been really taking almost all the flash there in Atlanta.
Same
and
with
yeah,
Hooper.
there's just a certain level of like a floor play when you're talking about starting a running back in the flex over a wide receiver. And I could really just see a guy like Ridley, coming through with like maybe not a 0, but something like a 2.2 that really doesn't actually help your week. And Montgomery, I think for him, you're safe with at least like a 5 to 7 range, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say closer to 8 might be Monty's floor. He'll catch a couple passes.
I think 5 to 7 would be a very pessimistic floor for him, and he could, his breakout is coming. I do actually believe that. So you could be looking at a good 14, 15 point day. But I think as low as he's going to go, I think, yes, I'd say 7 for me is that's probably as low as he would go. And for Ridley, I'd say almost anything's possible. A 2.2, a 3, a 3.5.
Yeah, he hasn't put up a 0 yet per se, but...
No, it's just in that type of offense with a guy like Julio Jones there ready to just grab everything. If the kind of the game story ends up going that way, the floor is very, very low for a guy like Calvin Ridley.
All right. Marky, you've got a decision as well, running back versus wide receiver. You have Demarcus Robinson versus Indianapolis or Peyton Barber at New Orleans. That's kind of gross.
Well, Landon, I low-key always want the Buccaneers to win, so in that regard, I could never actually play one because I got to jinx it. No. I do think right now Robinson is probably who I would take just because I trust him a lot more than like a Hardman or something on the Chiefs. I think he has made the best out of a lot of the targets he's gotten this year. And frankly, Peyton Barber, aside from getting like a goal line look and having a bit of touchdown upside, it's very clear to me that Ronald Jones is playing better football than him. And, if I were Bruce Arians, I'd be giving the ball to him because he has earned those goal line touchdowns even. Like it's, to me, this is a no-brainer.
What if it was Ronald Jones then in that scenario? Say Barber might not even be owned in your leagues. What if it's Ronald Jones versus Robinson?
That's That's
a lot closer.
That's an interesting one. Yeah, a lot closer. But I think kind of the same argument would be made as Scott just said. I think Ronald Jones right now is getting enough targets and enough legwork right now to make him that floor play in between these two. But as it stands between Robinson and Barber, I would go Robinson just because he's on the Chiefs. And Indianapolis is easy to score on right now.
Yeah, and we answer a lot of these questions on Sunday morning, and it also depends on whether you're favored or set to lose in projections. Getting these high upside long shots like Robinson might be what you need to win a matchup. Maybe that 8-point game might not do you any good. You might still lose, but a 25-point game like Robinson has shown, or Hardman, or some of these like DJ Chark or Will Fuller, that's kind of maybe what you need. You might, like, a floor might not help you out, right?
You got her, pal.
So, go ahead.
Landon, can I kick this to you? I am actually going to bring up a name you just dropped. I want to know your take on Josh Jacobs versus Chi-Town or Mecole Hardman versus Indy.
That's a really tough one because Chicago's defense has been stout. And I don't expect Josh Jacobs to have an exceptional game here. Hardman, I think his role is coming to an end with Tyreek being in limited practice all week. And last week, Hardman got you negative points. Like you hate to see it. But hopefully that negative points didn't lose you a matchup. I saw one where Baltimore defense got you negative points and the team only lost by 0.5 points. So you hate to have a guy lose you on a negative. So I would still probably go Jacobs. Jacobs is going to be a really good buy low candidate next week after Chicago and when they're on their bye week. I think that's the opportunity to buy Jacobs. I still think he's a very talented running back. And if you have an owner that really needs a win and you can buy a guy on his bye, that's a really good strategy. What do you guys think between Hardman? I just really didn't like that 0 or negative game from Hardman last week.
Yeah, I think Hardman's still going to be a big buzzword that when we talk about actually guys you could possibly sell high on. I think you might have waited a little too long on this guy this cycle. But if something happens to Tyreek again, then all of a sudden his value will completely skyrocket again. So I think we all know what. Yeah, I just was going to say, I think everybody now knows what the future probably holds for him as soon as you've got a healthy Tyreek. So I think he's going to go back to relative irrelevancy until injuries creep up again. And at that point, either you start him because you believe in him or you sell high.
Cool. And I think we had a question for Mack here, Golden Tate versus Minnie or Geronimo Allison at Dallas. And I think everyone is going to start Geronimo this week with Adams really being a question mark.
Yeah,
all right, Scotty, there. DK Metcalf or Jared Cook? So I guess Seattle plays tonight against the Rams. So that's a bad question.
You know what? I'm going to put it out there anyway, and I'm going to say I go 100% DK Metcalf versus Jared Cook. I own Jared Cook, and I have for a couple seasons now. And the reality is, at least in my opinion, without Drew Brees there, I find Jared Cook to be barely rosterable. Unfortunately, DK Metcalf can always go off. And you know what? We're through 1/3 of this, or what, 1/4 of the season now. Metcalf's a rookie, but he's through his first few games. He's probably always a good shot to go off at this point.
All right, Marky. I think I know the answer. This might be a silly question, but DJ Chark at Carolina or Hardman versus Indy?
So I really like DJ Chark this year, and I never thought that would be like my favorite player on this team, but like he has not upset this week, and the only reason he didn't score last week is because it was his touchdown was called back. He is playing out of his mind and has a great connection with everyone's favorite quarterback, Gardner Minshew. So I would take Chark here just because I know that he is going to get a stream of targets, and then Hardman is not going to get a lot of targets. I mean, if Hardman gets the points this week, it's going to be on one long bomb play or maybe like a jet sweep or something that yields him 60 yards.
Yeah,
Shark's that number one right now in Jacksonville, so all day.
I like that. Do you think Gardner Minshew is a decent streamer this week, Scotty? What are your thoughts on him? I know he's got a little bit of a knee thing, but I think he should play.
Yeah, last thing I heard is he should be playing, and I mean, you know what? As a streaming option, I do think you could do worse. He's doing something special there. I think everybody's holding. You're trying to hold back. You have to actually see him produce, many weeks in a row. I know all the analysts and broadcasters really aren't liking how people are calling him like the legend or the legendary stash. And
I know, I've had enough of that already too.
It's kind of I get where it's coming from, because it's guys like Randy Moss or the other guys on the panel, like they're literal Hall of Fame legends, and this guy's come in and he's been entertaining, he's been fun, he's been, I'd say, an above average quarterback, and obviously we know what his draft pedigree is. He's certainly playing a lot higher than where he was drafted, so there's a little bit of that like underdog story, but the whole idea of like he's a legend is he's not a legend. He's been playing passable. So I'd say he's a streaming option for sure.
It was funny on Barstool Sports for a week, and everyone please stop calling Gardner Minshew the GOAT. I am already fed up with how much that term is used.
I love the Blazers. The mustache is great. He's an entertaining guy, but I don't think that necessarily means he's going to be a great streaming option. I do think he would be probably a passable streaming option. I don't think he's going to lose you your week. I don't really think he's going to win it for you, though.
There you go. And lastly, my decision is between MVS, Marcus Valdes-Scantling at Dallas, or Stephon Diggs against the Giants. That's a really tough one. A lot of people are in between starting Diggs this week. He's probably going to be on a lot of benches, but I think this week I would go Diggs over MVS. Like I said earlier, the pass catchers in Mini, I think, see a bounce back week.
Boy, how the greats have fallen to think that that's even a question. But this season, boy, is it ever.
So next we've got fraud or for real players. Big weeks last week, and I want to know if you think these guys will keep it up. We talked about Leonard Fournette earlier. 29 attempts, 225 yards, 20 yards of receptions. Do you guys think is this for real, or do you think this is a fraud?
I'm going to say fraud at this level. I do think Fournette's going to have an okay season. I think with Minshew there, I do think that's going to maybe open up the box just a little bit more the way I kind of hoped it was going to with Nick Foles, because it's a really interesting stat. If you look up the percentage of plays that Fournette has lined up for in his career with Jacksonville, it's something like 49% of the time they've stacked the box statistically.
Yeah.
So with that being said, it does make sense that he seems like a guy who has a lot of talent that just can't seem to put up consistently good fantasy yards. I do think that this was, this is the high point of the season. Like, if you've got him, sell now. Like, sell high. He's absolutely a start. That's not the question to me. But, he ran 30 times. He ran for 225 yards. He's not doing that again this week. He's not doing that again this season. I doubt he'll be over 200 yards for at any other point this season. He's not. He is a legitimate starter in fantasy. He is not a 200 plus yards a week guy.
That's fair.
This was his one. If you started him, congratulations. Sell high, and good luck if you just start him every week, because I don't think he'll be a league winner.
Marky, Jordan Howard had 15 attempts, 87 yards, and 2 touchdowns on a lot of people's benches. Do you think he is for real? Do you think he's going to be the goal line back in Philly? Is Miles Sanders just kind of the back burner there? What do you think about Jordan Howard? Is he a fraud, or this is for real?
I still think Jordan Howard would be a great flex play, especially this week against the Jets. He showed enough last week for him to probably get as many touches, maybe between 10 and 15. But really made the best of them and just found that pay dirt. So I think Jordan Howard is a go-ahead for this week against the Jets.
I like it.
I'll chime in quickly on that one too. What I thought while watching it that really became pretty clear, I think Jordan Howard is a great candidate to be kind of this season's vulture. I think he really showed he knows how to, throw himself within a 5-yard line at that end zone. And Sanders has the speed. There's no doubt that he's the future as far as their every down back who's going to try to stretch the field. But I think that we're going to see Howard get more rushing touchdowns per, snaps almost than anybody in the league, because he just
what Latavius Murray was last year as well.
Absolutely. Or the original vulture, the bowling ball there in Carolina. But it's just their styles are so different. And I just don't know if Sanders is the guy that you actually want to give the ball to within the 3 or 5 yard line. But Howard really looks like the guy that you want running around the red zone. And I think that could be really good for flex plays. He looked pretty electric, at least within that 10, 15, 20 yard line. Outside of that, you're giving the ball to Sanders.
So
Lando,
next, yeah.
How about I ask you the next one? I want to know whether you think my guy, Jameis Winston, is fraud or for real. He came off a big week last week. I loved it personally. What do you think?
Or how Scott calls him, Jameis Winston.
I will always call him Jameis.
You can't not talk about Jameis after that big week. It's amazing how they beat the Rams this week, and he only threw 1 interception. Normally, if he throws 4 TDs, it's at least 4 interceptions. So, I think the weapons they have, I think he's the best streamer in the league. He's not an every week start. He's not a matchup-proof quarterback by any means, but I think he's the best streaming quarterback you could probably get because of the weapons, because of their game plan. Chris Godwin is an absolute stud. I know Mack is thrilled when he plants a flag on a guy and a guy goes off like what Chris Godwin has, I think it feels great as an analyst. So I think he's not a fraud per se, but he's not going to have those types of weeks every week, despite the fact that they played a pretty good defense against the Rams. Finally, Scotty, we have a guy that you picked up in a lot of leagues. You spent the half a boat for this guy, Wayne Gallman. And as we saw this past week, Saquon's been running and practicing already. An injury that was supposedly a 4 to 6 week absence, a high ankle sprain. Saquon is a superhuman. He doesn't get injured. He attacks rehab like he attacks the bench press or the squat rack. So Wayne Gallman, obviously you got to think he's a fraud if Saquon's back.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the thing. I do think that they're going to try to hold Saquon back as long as they humanly can. I just don't see the Giants' season as one where they're going to the playoffs this season, and Dan Jones is. He at least had one game.
They're hyped in New York right now with Dan Jones, how good he's playing.
Well, and that's the thing. They've got the hype with Dan Jones. I'm sure they do want to get Saquon back, but at the same time, now they have their quarterback of the future. If they rush Saquon back, and I bet you it's basically like, trying to lock him in a room or something at game time and like not letting him out or something. But he did have, a really bad high ankle sprain. And, I mean, we see it with AP and, these guys do come back, especially these young, not rookies, but the young players. So I think they're going to try to hold him out for as long as they can just for the good of the franchise because he is their franchise player, even with Dan Jones now anointed. That being said, I do think Wayne Gallman keeps some value. I only forecast him as a starter for maybe the next 2 weeks. I think that's probably about as long as the Giants, coaching staff and medical staff will probably be able to keep Saquon out if he is actually out running. Obviously he's a starter this week, and it was a pretty explosive game last week. But I'm going to say he is not a fraud. I just think he's going to lose his spot.
No, he's a fraud. They play Minnesota and New England the next 2 weeks. He's not going to do what he just did. They played Washington. Anyway.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. I still think that he's going to put up decent numbers this week.
All right. Let's get into the starts of the week. We also have a sit of the week for everyone involved. So we'll start with Marky. Give us your start of the week and then give us your sit.
Okay, I have got my start of the week in Green Bay's offense here. With Adams out, I am going to go for Jimmy Graham, the tight end, just because it's very obvious to me that he is that big target that Aaron Rodgers needs. The other receivers on that core are young and somewhat unproven, and I could just tell by the way that Rodgers was forcing that ball into Graham's hands last week that he's going to get a lot of targets this week.
I like it. And your sit, if you can help it?
My sit of the week is, sadly, Josh Jacobs. Don't get me wrong, I love this player, but I wouldn't start anyone against Chicago's defense right now.
If you can help it, for sure. All right, my start of the week, I talked about them earlier. I'm sounding like a broken record, but Adam Thielen, I think he gets a lot of targets. I give him at least 8 to 10 targets this week, and they play a very susceptible Giants defense. And then my sit of the week, if you can help it, and I can't in one league, is Frank Gore. The guy does not stop moving. Even if Singletary is involved, I think Frank Gore is still going to get the work, but Tennessee's defense looks really good. So I think his floor is decently safe, but if you can avoid Frank Gore, do it this week.
Okay. Solid. And for me, my start of the week, once again, broken record, Jacoby Brissett against Kansas City Chiefs. I forecast this game to be just a shootout on both sides of the ball. And T.Y. Hilton's a game-time decision, but if he laces it up, then I think you've got a great offense, and Brissett's been looking great this season. So if you can get him, start him. As far as my sit of the week, I'm going against the grain here, and I will never probably pick these guys again, but I am taking the Arizona Cardinals defense against Andy Dalton. I think he's lost too many wide receivers now that he's got Ross out to go along with AJ Green's injury, and I actually think they're susceptible to a defense that has scored almost no fantasy points this season. So I'm going out on a limb, Arizona's D.
And Mackenzie's start of the week at wide receiver is Geronimo Allison, and his sit is going to be Melvin Gordon. He wants to see it first if he can help it. I think Eckler's still going to be involved. Who's to say Eckler still doesn't maintain that wide or running back one spot in this offense? So interesting play. I think I kind of do like it. I don't feel super confident starting Melvin Gordon this week either. So. For everyone on Instagram, I know we said we're going to answer some questions. I know Mackenzie did answer them to you directly. Maybe next week we can get some more discussion and talk about the listener questions. But I think that's our time, fellas. Hopefully everyone has a good weekend. And any final words? Oh, don't forget to follow us on Patreon.
Yeah, I think when you listen to this episode, there's lots of names in there that may just come across your waiver wire for a last-minute pickup, or if you need to slot someone in before that Sunday matchup. Like, there's lots of prime targets here to look for. So, yeah, keep your ears tuned for our next episode, and stay on social to keep tabs on our Sunday happenings.
Yep, and we're putting out a lot of content, so I'll be putting out Friday morning coffee to catch you up to date on the Thursday night football recap, and we've got stuff coming out almost every day right up till Sunday kickoff, so be part of the community. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, have a great Saturday, everyone, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Saturday Morning Snap Fantasy Football Podcast. Follow us on Twitter at SMS_fantasy. Support this independent podcast at patreon.com/Saturday Morning.